Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Clark. I am the Communications Coordinator for the Organization for Responsible Governance. I'm happy to invite you and welcome you to this sixth panel session for the day. Our theme is consensus-oriented, meaningful consultation with government. Our premise is that the public consultation is noted as a best practice for governance, as a mechanism to ensure that policy is representative of the interests of the people. In the Bahamas, opportunities for consultation with the public have increased in recent years, but the practice is still sporadic and inconsistent. One concern is the time that consultation can have on the timeliness of policy development. So the question we're asking today is, how do we build consultation as a practice among citizens and governments? On our panel today, we have Ms. Stacey Moutry, the Honorable Basil McIntosh, who is the Minister of State for the Environment, and Mr. David Forbes, who is the Executive Director of the Parliament of the Bahamas. I'd like to welcome Ms. Moutry to the podium.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to ORG for the opportunity to present. This presentation is based on my 25 plus years of being involved with consultations on environmental issues. So one of the projects that I worked on was the 2016 Integrated Coastal Zone Management Policy Framework. And that project actually looked heavily at how can stakeholders or the public be engaged to deal with integrated coastal zone management. So the framework has a number of themes. One of them is governance and planning, and a recommendation under that theme was that strong stakeholder participation be sought. The framework is built on several principles, including effectiveness and efficiency, but also participation. Public education and outreach is one of the policy goals, and public participation is one of the policy strategies. It also talked about principles like having effectiveness and efficiency in government, but again, participation was stressed. Our goals under the framework included public education and outreach, and it also outlined some strategies on how you would engage the public to participate in decision-making around ICZM. So the policy framework also went into depth about what are some of the models that the Bahamas could use to facilitate strong stakeholder participation, and what does that mean? And basically what it said is that strong participation is where persons are not consulted after decisions are made, but are engaged throughout the decision-making process, from the formulation of ideas through the implementation of the policy or project or whatever it may be. The graphic that you see here is called the Arnstein Ladder of Citizen Participation, and it was developed by Sherry Arnstein in 1969, and it's still used today as a means to describe, what are the goals we want to achieve. So at the very bottom, you would have manipulation of the public, where you're actually not sharing information with them, and you kind of keeping things from them, and you're making decisions without them. I would say that the Bahamas is somewhere between rungs 3 and 5. We inform the public, sometimes we consult with them, sometimes we placate them, and that's collectively referred to as tokenism. So we're calling it participation, but we kind of just go through the motions. And even when we do consultation, we're not really integrating public input into the decision-making process. So if you want strong participation from the public, you're aiming for rungs 6 through 7. So partnership, delegating some of the decision-making power to the stakeholders, and also giving them some control over certain issues. Another model that the project looked at for strong stakeholder participation is one developed by Collins and Eisen in 2009. And their model is based on social learning. So what Collins and Eisen said is that you may not necessarily want to have citizen control as your ultimate outcome, but you do want to have collective learning. And what social learning is a collective process that can take place through interactions between different stakeholders, and it's given proper facilitation, institutional support, and a conducive policy environment. And what you find happening if you pursue social learning is that you begin to see a conversion of goals and knowledge and change in behaviors. And the model is built on the principles of mutual respect between all stakeholders, as well as shared responsibilities and benefits from implementing a particular policy, program, or project. So under the framework, ICZM framework policy, what we said was that the Bahamas could look to the Einstein model as well as the social learning model as a means to gauge how it would go how it would achieve strong stakeholder participation through policy development. One of the most successful public consultation projects that I've seen executed since I've been working on this issue is the development of the National Environmental Policy and the National Environmental Management and Action Plan that took place in 2005. In that project, the technical team on the project visited every island, every settlement, and talked to every age group. They had consultations with kindergarten students up until people who were retired. So the age span for that consultation was 4 to 90. Okay, and they made sure and they talked to as many people as possible across the country. Islands that we don't normally go to, like Mayaguana and Ragged Island, they sent teams there. And based on the input that they got from the citizenry of the entire country, they drafted the policy and the action plan, taking into consideration what they said the issues were and what their needs were as a community. So that project worked really well in terms of public consultation. So what are some of the things that you could encourage citizens and governments to engage? So again, this whole concept of mutual respect. We must respect each other in order to engage properly, and we must be transparent. Government has to have the political will to engage. If it doesn't, it's just going to be tokenism that we talked to before, where you check the box. Yes, I consulted with the people, I sent the document out for 30 days, but you're not really interested in listening or incorporating what they have to say. Citizens also have a responsibility, and they need to apply their critical thinking skills. We have to have a citizenry that's able to look at issues and filter out the political noise, the religious noise, and come to conclusions on what is best for them as an individual. And that doesn't mean that we will always agree on issues, but we will definitely be able to hear the different voices and understand how we can adapt policy or programs to suit as many of the citizens as possible. So citizens need to be engaged early about how we're going to develop policy plans and projects, and they also need to be engaged about what the priority goals and objectives should be for these things. They also need access to data and information. If you want to make good decisions, those decisions have to be informed. So you can't just give people parts of the information. And any transparency in government must involve sharing of power. And one of the biggest issues we often have with public consultation is we don't give it sufficient time. There's always a rush. We're always in a rush to get things done. And if you want to have strong public participation throughout the entire process, you have to allocate sufficient time for that to happen. You can't decide, okay, I'm going to draft this policy and get it approved in 30 days and expect there to be strong public participation. Because if you're gonna have it early, you need to reach out to people to let them know you're doing it. You have to consult them throughout the process. You have to consider and analyze their feedback before you even start drafting. And the Bahamas is an archipelago with 13 major inhabited islands. If you truly want policy to be national, that means you need to engage with all those islands, and that takes time. So what are some of the tools that we could use to facilitate public participation? A lot of times we'll send out these really hefty documents, and people have lives. They have other things to do. So we need to figure out how to make the information as simple as possible by using things like infographics or posters, or reducing the size of the document to a summary so that people at least get the key points. They also have to have various means of access. Examples of that is you can have face-to-face public meetings, but if COVID has taught us one thing, is that Zoom can work. Okay, and Zoom is especially useful if you have an archipelago. You may not be able to fly to every island, but you could certainly host Zoom meetings for every community. And of course, email is another option. If you're doing public participation in governance, you have to have government contacts that respond. If you list a phone number, somebody has to answer that number. If you provide an email, someone needs to respond to that email. Otherwise, it's just hollow. You're giving people contacts and they can never reach a human being or get any feedback on their questions. We need to have information or knowledge platforms that function. How many portals that we have that are having problems functioning or are down? Okay, if you're using platforms to share information, they have to work, and they have to work all the time. Because some people may be up at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that's the only time they have to read through the information. So these platforms have to function. The outreach also has to be consistent and through various media to match the learning types. Some people are visual in the way that they take in and analyze information. Some people do it better through listening, and some people actually need to move while they're trying to absorb information. So you have to think about the different ways that you could communicate with people to help them best understand what you're trying to say. And again, I can't stress this enough. We have to have advanced planning so that we allocate sufficient time so that the public can participate in the process. If you're putting out a document that's 200 pages, you can't expect people to come back with any sensible feedback in 30 days, okay? Some people won't be able to understand what's in that document, so you need to break it down. Again, that takes time. And so making sure that when we plan, we do it far enough in advance and have consideration for all the steps that need to happen to make sure we engage as many people as possible in a meaningful way. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moutry. We will now call up the Honorable Basil McIntosh.
Good evening, folks. I'm going to make my comment a bit short and hopefully sweet. I know I was given a time constraint, so I'm going to make it rather brief, but you should be able to understand what I'm saying. Of course, it's indeed a pleasure to address you on environmental matters. As you are aware, environmental changes or challenges are now popping up not only in the Bahamas, but also in the world. Environmental noticeable now than ever before, and these are something we must pay attention to. It impacts our everyday life as far as beaches, wildlife, marines, and forests, just to name a few. However, we must say that climate change plays a major role in these activities. It was just a couple years ago when we encountered a major hurricane activity that we may never forget. By all, I'm referring to Hurricane Dorian, which was devastated in Grand Bahama and Abaco. I have personally witnessed the devastation of Dorian had done to our country. I had witnessed the devastation firsthand by seeing the amount of crude oil which spilled out of the storage tanks and created an environment impact. In the eastern of Grand Bahama, which destroyed acres of vegetation. I have visited the site lately, but I am going back shortly. The impact of pollutant like petroleum released during the Equinor oil spill. I also had the opportunity to go into Abaco right after the hurricane also. The level of environment devastation was something to see, both Abaco and Grand Bahama, in just finding their way back to normalcy. These two areas were mentioned because we had never had that kind of activities locally before. Some years ago, our communities were never this filthy. Our fathers and mothers had pride in their surrounding, and as a boy growing up on the island of Managua, we had to see to it that if we see one can, a bottle, a piece of paper laying around, we had to pick it up and place it in a bin or location where it can be used again for some useful purpose. I would say hurricane challenges us and the environment. The pine forest, the mangrove, and the coral reefs that support life on the island will sustain significant damages in many areas. In addition to structural damages, damage to coral colonies from various debris and uproot of trees caused the loss of coral on some of the reefs. From direct observation, red mangroves suffer the most significant damage, which may have significant for our restoration approach. We have traveled throughout the land, and it becomes more and more filthier than ever before. The amount of abandoned vehicles just piled up on the side of the streets and the roadways, which brings down and devalues properties in various communities. Roadside mechanic shops contribute to our environment. The Department of Environment will see to it that these communities are properly cleaned up. In addition to taking each one of us to do our part in seeing that the island is clean, we from the environmental department plan to travel throughout the length and breadth of this country, because a lot of people think that Nassau is the Bahamas, and Nassau is the only island that has these problems. But it's throughout. And we will do our very best from the Department of Environmental to see to it that they are cleaned and pristine. To that end, I thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will now have Mr. David Forbes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I have to make a slight apology to you all because I was told that I would be speaking on effective and efficient government, but of course that ties into the entire thing that we're doing, so I can't deviate from that at this late stage, so let's talk about that. First of all, I want to thank you for being here. Your presence here today indicates your desire to participate in what this symposium is trying to offer. That's a great place to start. I cannot think of a need more pressing in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas than effective and efficient public service reform. When I was first approached to participate in this event, I have to say in all honesty that I was not at all enthusiastic. Reformation, from my experience in the Bahamas, is an idea that is anathema to the Bahamian culture. But on second thought, I said, this may be the very event that will light a spark, and that start a blaze that is needed to start this discussion. I will tell you a little something about reform. It does not happen in a vacuum. Reformation is the birth child of public participation. The history of the Bahamas would have been one boring round of dissatisfied continuance were it not for public participation. If you were to purchase a vehicle or any other type of machinery from a manufacturer, you would want to use a manual. And your warranty will tell you that if you operated that machinery contrary to the use of manual, you would have canceled out your warranty. Ladies and gentlemen, we operate a parliamentary democracy. We operate the Westminster model. There's ample information on how this model is supposed to work. But here we are in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas trying to run the Westminster model contrary to the use of manual. It will never work. As a result, we are all dissatisfied customers. If I try to fit my remarks into the narrow confines of the public service, I will not do this topic justice. So I will not do that. Public service is tied into many facets of government. It can be a generic term, but it can also be specific to the public service. Today I want to treat the subject in its generic manifestation. We operate a governmental system into which the public service fits, but government is in and of itself a lot more than just the public service. In order to have effective and efficient public service reform, the government must be firmly structured. In order for the government to be firmly structured, we as citizens must understand it and insist on it. We must be willing to participate. We must respect our national institutions enough to defend them. There is a gaping hole in our governmental structure that needs fixing. In order for a country to claim democratic status, our government must be constructed on the principles of democracy. At the very foundation of that democratic principle lies the separation of powers with all of its component parts. At the very pinnacle of the democratic structure is the parliament, and this is as it should be. Your parliament represents you. It is where you have a voice through your elected representatives. The Constitution that created the Commonwealth of the Bahamas lays everything out in a very logical way. I would say in the order of precedence, starting with the most important. Chapter 1 creates the state and establishes the Constitution as the supreme law. Chapter 2 creates the citizen. Chapter 3 provides for the protection of your fundamental rights and freedoms. Chapter 4 makes the Governor General the head of state. Chapter 5, 6, and 7 creates the government with its 3 separate branches of power. Chapter 5 creates the Parliament. Chapter 6 creates the executive. Chapter 7 creates the judiciary. When Bahamian people speak of the government, they are usually referring to the executive branch of the government. This narrow concept, while not false at all, it hinders an informed and harmonious discussion. This is hardly an environment likely to produce effective and efficient public service reform. If we are going to have this discussion, we must all be on the same page. We must all be talking about the same thing. While the executive branch is part of the government, it is not a complete definition. The Parliament and the judiciary are also integral parts of the government. The driving point in this short discourse is this. As I stated earlier, there is a gaping hole in our governmental structure. It stands on a weak foundation because the vital ingredients called the separation of powers is missing. Without the separation of powers, our democracy is at best anemic. Parliament has two basic functions. Number one, Parliament is the law-making machine of the government. Parliament carries out this function very efficiently. There is no challenge to Parliament carrying out this function. Number two, Parliament's additional function is to hold the government to account. The Constitution states as follows: there shall be a cabinet that shall be accountable to the Parliament. To put it simply, one of the functions of the Parliament is to supervise the cabinet, and this is where the problem begins. Parliament lacks the legal framework to carry out this very important constitutional function. Parliament will never be able to perform this very important function unless and until it is first freed from the executive's control by legislative fiat. An act of Parliament must be passed to create a Parliamentary Service Commission and to set the Parliament apart from the executive and the judiciary. Additionally, Parliament must pass an act to set a ceiling on the percentage of MPs that can be appointed to the cabinet. We should either increase the number of seats in Parliament or reduce the number of members in the cabinet. When these two pieces of legislation are passed and brought into force, it is then, and only then, that Parliament will be free to carry out all of its constitutional functions. Before you can have any effective and efficient public service reform, this must be the framework from which we begin. And this must be the first step. Reformation must start here. But not only must Parliament be set free, the judiciary must likewise be set free. When these two vitally important steps are taken, it is then, and only then, that we can see clearly to begin the discussion of effective and efficient public service reform. Try as you may, all of your efforts will be in vain unless and until you insist on these things. Finally, effective and efficient public sector reform requires active and robust public participation from the general public. Every citizen must have a public interest. Civil society is really only beginning to show its head in a meaningful way here of late. If you care about your country, you have to become involved in its maintenance. You have to educate yourself on how it is supposed to function. You must grow and nurture a mature and decided approach to the building of your country. Citizen involvement must be the most powerful force impacting the government. You have to appreciate that. You have to realize the importance of that. No one person can be involved in every aspect of the government, but every citizen could be involved in something. Choose something you are passionate about and get involved. If you are not committed to something at the national level, well, don't lament the situation you find yourself in one day. Never be more loyal to your political party than you are to your country. This is a grave mistake. Because if something goes wrong, as it most definitely will, you may find yourself a greater loser than you ever imagined you could be. That is my short discourse on effective and efficient public service reform. I will now be happy to give you the answer to any question you may wish to ask, provided I have the answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we had a very diverse amount of discourse today. I'm going to do my best to try to get us back to meaningful consultation with government. I feel that Minister McIntosh and Mr. Forbes can definitely speak to that topic as best as you can. We have 3 panel questions that we want you to consider. First one is, what are successful, I think Stacy spoke to this already, a successful local example of how public consultation has led to a more effective policy. She referred to the consultation that happened in 2005 for the environment. But in your opinions, Minister McIntosh and Mr. Forbes and Ms. Mutri, how do you think citizens and government can be encouraged to engage in public consultations? And what are tools that can be used to facilitate greater public consultation? I'll give you guys the mic.
Well, I guess the consultation part of it,
I guess we talk from a government standpoint. Ms. Mutri, when you were talking, one of the issues you had primarily was the fact that government in particular, there seems to be an issue where there's a time constraint when things are getting done. It's usually a 30-day time constraint. You guys can explain why the 30 days is standard? And if there would be at any point, or if there could be at any point, some way for that 30 days to be extended in order for consultation to be a bit more meaningful.
Well, I would like to actually comment on the first question, if you don't mind. Now, you'll notice in my discourse, I talk about what was absolutely necessary in getting things done. You will find that as long as those component parts are missing, you're going to end up with these types of problems. Now, for example, you would no doubt recall that the local gambling was a matter of public consultation. And the public voted resoundingly no, that we do not want that. But of course, we do have that. And that will happen as long as you have a situation existing where the majority of your members of your parliament are in the executive branch, and they are bound by collective responsibility. They are not, if they decide to deviate from the party's policy, they will lose their job. That's the Constitution. So the thing about it is that, first of all, you have to structure your government to get to where this question is asking about, what this question is asking about. Otherwise, you're not going to be moving anywhere. We're going to just be a marking time, all right? And these are very, very important. They seem like window dressing, but trust me, they underpin your democracy and everything that we are discussing down here today. You want me to answer, speak to this? Okay, how can citizens and government be encouraged to engage in public consultation? Well, you're finding now that governments are trying harder than ever before to engage in public consultation, because if you don't do that, every 5 years you're going to get fired. And that has been happening from 2002, where governments, well, politicians, not naturally, and there's nothing wrong with that, feel like they have the answers. That's why they offer themselves to elected office, so that they can run the country for you. But at the end of the day, you're finding that really without public consultation, you're going to put your foot in your mouth sometimes. You do the wrong thing and people get ticked off at you. So I think what needs to happen is civil society, as well as the government in general, need to realize that if you're going to really push through any meaningful policy, you need more than one term in office. And you have to get the citizen on board with that, so that they, as long as the citizens you're doing what they want you to do, they'll allow you to extend your tenure in office. But if you don't get that done, I don't know how we're going to encourage them to do more of it. But, you know, I don't think the Bahamas benefits very much from having these quick turnaround in government, because every government comes to power and is doing something good. They may be doing some bad things too, but if you can't really decide and set a national policy that both of the major political parties are going to agree to, then you're going to have this continuous deviation, swing hard to the left, swing hard to the right. And at the end of the day, good policies get dashed as well as bad policies. So, okay. Now, I'm going to leave the rest of this to the other two panels. What are tools that can be used to facilitate good public participation consultation?
No, I mentioned some. I mentioned some in the presentation. You know, just trying to engage people in the ways that they communicate best. You know, whether that be visual through things like infographics, or auditory through messages or talk shows on radio. But again, I guess the important point is both sides have to want to engage. We talk about the government and having the will to do it and to listen, and to not just listen but incorporate the recommendations and the desires of the people. But the people also have to be willing to take the time to, you know, read through the information that's provided to them and have comments. And I think it will take time for us to get good at this, but we have to put in place the foundations to enable that to happen. I agree with what Mr. Forbes says. I guess what I have always struggled with is, how do you get the changes you need when the people who have the power to make the change refuse to do it? And we're not a country that has riots and revolutions, but is that what is gonna have to happen? Because we change the parties every 5 years and we don't seem to get any closer to transparency, accountability, communicating information and data. How long have we been talking about freedom of information? I just don't understand. But I don't expect anybody in this room to have the answer. But the challenge I have as a Bahamian is I want to participate in governance. I am hindered in doing that, as is every citizen. And the people who can change that seem to have no will to make the change.
I think the tool that, that one should have to make a difference is education. We have to continue trying to educate the people to whatever decision they want to make. It have to be education. You have to. I can't see it any other way.
So org has one of its pillars is education reform. And we have a term that we've coined, cradle to career. That the one thing that's the one common theme that's come about is education. The question is, when it comes to consensus orientation and meaningful consultation, is where does this education start? Because you would think that if we're doing some kind of meaningful consultation on some changes in government or policy, we're considering, at the very least, persons 18 years and older, whereas it may need to start a little sooner. Maybe at the junior high school and high school level in civics. How do we get, I guess my question would be, how do we get to make that first step to encourage the education and the knowledge equipment needed for younger citizens to become to a point, get to a point where they're more engaged. So when it gets to the level where they get to vote, or they're able or eligible to vote, they make a more informed and well-rounded decision.
I would think at a very young age, probably around maybe 16, 17, if they start the education around that age, as they grow, they will remember these things and they will be able to make decisions. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult. In spite of me saying that education is the key, they would have to start from very, very, very young age. And I would think about 16, 17 is the age in which to start that. And hopefully that should do it. Because we got to continue to press, to drive, teach them what they should know, and hopefully they will take it in. If you keep on hitting them on the nail with the information, the correct information, it will stick. And so that would be my suggestion, to do,
Well, I do agree fundamentally with the minister, but I think education, and especially when it comes to the governance of your country, that's a lifetime thing. And I really think it should start at the very beginning of your schooling. Because this is where you get the basics in, the very beginning, the cornerstone, like what government is and all of that stuff. You start that very, very early. Because it's a very complex structure that you're building. And if you start at 17, kids are graduating from high school at that time. And so much other things would have already contaminated and confused the thing. I think you could start teaching kids about the simple principles of government from they enter high school, not high school, sorry. At the age of 5, people can understand there's certain logics about it. And I can tell you, the United States does something like that, where you start learning about your government from the very beginning. And the same thing happens in Britain, in the UK. You have to see, first of all, this governance is not really our culture like it is theirs. And so our government is like learned behavior, and so that's the reason why so many people don't have any idea about what we're really doing unless you're working in the government itself. And I think that really affects our country in a very negative way. You have to teach people about your government institution, the rule of law, and all the rest of that. Everybody must obey and be held equal to the law. Everybody has to be equal before the law. And if you don't get that, then you're going to find that other social ties are going to overpower that. And so people who belong to certain factions are going to be more loyal to those factions than they are to the country. And that's the reason why I said in my short discourse that, your political party has to take second seat to your national government. And if we don't do it from the very beginning, because when you start off school, you even ain't thinking about PLP and FNM or DNA, you just in there to try and learn. So the building blocks for this thing has to start very early, because like I said, it's a very complicated and long, far-reaching process, the education and learning about your government. You have something to say?
Any questions? All right, yes.
Yeah, sorry, the minister spoke about education, and then I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Forbes before this breakout room session started, and it just reminded me about the fact that we have programs in place, and I don't know if we have the programs in place because we want to say that we're doing these things, even though we're not doing it to the fullest. And we have high school students as well as college students participating in the youth in Parliament. And yes, it's all good that they're participating in this, but like Mr. Forbes said, we have the Westminster model and we don't fully understand it. And we have students going into Parliament and enacting those roles as minister or members of Parliament, and they don't fully understand it. But if we were to take even that seriously, that program seriously, where we say that only persons who would have gone through a 1-year or 2-year course in order to be able to appreciate what they're going into the next step, which is the graduating course, which is the youth in Parliament. Then we would have people who are going into politics who understand the system very well before they were to be elected as, the popular or whatever party is being taken out or put in. So I think if just looking at just that one, because I'm speaking since you are in here, if we were to look at just the youth in Parliament as a way of getting youth to be more aware of what our system is of governance, that's one thing that you could suggest to our government.
Thank you, Ms. Ingram. We have one question from Zoom. Question is coming from Peter Goody. It reads, I heard about educating the public, but wouldn't it be members of cabinet to consult and listen to the citizens?
Yeah, it could be member of Parliament or member of the cabinet. The point is we want to get the message out. And the only way to get it out if it's one of us, and I say one of us because I'm in the cabinet now. And so, yes, it makes sense what the call-out said. But again, it takes us to get the message out to the public. And at the same time, the public must be prepared to accept our challenge to them. But me personally, whatever I know, I'm more than happy to impart it to those who are interested. And so, yeah, we can do it.
So I have one final question for each one of the panelists. You, Minister McIntosh, as a member of government, you, Mr. Forbes, as actually a neutral party, because you operate regardless of which party is in power. And you, Ms. Moutry, as a concerned citizen and an environmentalist. What is one concession that each one of you, and not just you alone, but you as representing your entities, what is one concession that you can make to make one step forward to closing the gap to ensuring that meaningful consultation could be something that is consistent, a consistent reality for the Bahamas? Okay, so I'll ask the question again. Minister McIntosh, you as a government person, Mr. Forbes, you as a neutral party, and Ms. Moutry, you as a concerned citizen and an environmentalist, speaking from the civil society aspect, what is one concession that your entities can make to ensure that we take one closer step to closing this gap, to making sure that meaningful consultation in the Bahamas is a more consistent and realistic goal or thing?
But I guess for me, again, we go back on education. We go back on information. We need to educate the the population as to the way forward in politics, especially. And with that, we're hoping that they can take what we give to them and put it to use. You know, it is something that they can use once it's given to them properly. It has to be done properly now. You know, they can take it and use it. So that would be my answer to that. With the information.
Well, the Parliament, one of the things that is always going to be an impediment to that is that Parliament, especially since the pandemic, but even before, we are occupying an edifice that was built in 1815. And we really would love to see more members of the public come and visit the Parliament and actually see the Parliament in session. So we'd like to really be able to welcome more persons from the general public to come and see us in action, to see what we do. And in order to do that, you're going to need a new edifice, because quite frankly, the place where we meet right now was designed for 3 staff members. We have like 25. Then there's another thing. The parliamentary channel is what we're hoping to use to educate our people. And I can think of one great program to put on that right now, Ask My MP. And this will allow citizens from not only citizens, constituents, to come to the channel and pose questions to their MPs. And of course, it wouldn't be an impromptu thing. You pose the question and we'll give the MP, let the MP know that this question has been asked by this person, this particular constituent of yours. And so at a certain time of every week, it'll be a weekly thing. You could run it for half an hour where constituents are asking questions of the MPs and the MPs are answering them. I think that is something that would be a wonderful start for us. And the whole idea of the youth parliament was started in the Bahamas, in this region. In 2000, we started the youth parliament, and it's been pretty consistent ever since. The only thing is that we have a damper on that now that we've had COVID-19, but that seems to be going away. So I think we'll soon be back in the saddle again doing that. But we intend to do great things. But the only way we can do that is you must breathe life into the institution. And everything that I said in my discourse, maybe we haven't grasped the entire thing. Maybe we haven't grasped the entire thing, but if you really digest that, you'll realize that all of that we are saying is underpinning this. This is underpinning everything. If you have a parliament that is understaffed, then of course, nothing that you're talking about is going to happen. And if you don't give it the resources it needs, then even these wonderful programs that I could think of for the parliamentary channel will never occur. These are things that we as citizens of this country must demand. Your parliament is the only place in the government where you have a voice through your elected representatives. And if you don't use that, then, power tends to leak, and it will leak out and you won't have it if you don't use it. That would be what I would say. Those are 2 things, actually, not just one. But those are 2 concessions that we could make that will greatly enhance our democracy and our public participation.
It's hard to speak for citizens collectively because that's a lot of people. As a concerned citizen, personally, I don't know what else I could do other than maybe grab my MP and shake him. But maybe I can encourage other citizens to be more engaged so that, when there are opportunities to comment on policy or talk to members of parliament about it, to encourage them to do that. I've actually written several policy documents for the Bahamas government that have been passed when I was in government. So maybe encouraging people to understand that process and how it works, getting people to understand that they can draft policy themselves and put it forward. through their MP, that it doesn't have to come from inside government, but they can generate policy as well. And so just being more active. And I think a lot of civil society organizations like org are trying to do that through conferences like this, as well as a lot of the information that they share. So I guess as citizens, we just have to work harder to encourage other citizens to join us, and so that we can hopefully come to a tipping point where we have enough people making enough noise that Parliament begins to listen.
Thank you so much. Mr. Forbes, I think this question is directed toward you. It's from Erin Brown. Is there a plan to make Parliament more accessible? And she's talking from the disabilities aspect. As it stands currently, it is inaccessible in physical space and in communication. So there's no closed captioning on the parliamentary channel or sign language. The Youth in Parliament program has also not given access to students with disabilities as well. Has this been discussed to be changed?
You notice I'm eager to get this microphone on that one. That's because the answer is yes. The problem is with the existing structure, there is really no way you can do that without offending the, what you call them, Rashad? The people who don't want you to touch any old building, antiquities and monuments. So the best thing to do is build this edifice that we're talking about. I can think of a great spot to put it. And we have already discussed about the closed captioning as well as the sign languages for the parliamentary channel. These are things that I have in the forefront, in my frontal lobe. You know what I'm saying? So really, my whole thing, I'm not going to be around forever, but I'm hoping that I could get this train on the right track so that when I sail off into the sunset, I could look back and say, you know something, that ship is well trimmed and sailing beautifully. I have a very small staff of very, very hardworking, dedicated people. And I can tell you, we churn out way more than our fair share. We work as a team. We have a very, very wonderful working environment. And I know this lady who's asking this question because she's been there before. And she came up those stairs all by herself. And she was insisting that she be a part of this thing. And I admire her for that, for her determination to not be handicapped, even though she may be handicapped, if you know what I mean. So this is something that really appeals to me on a very personal level. And in the House of Assembly, we really are very open to the public. No one will ever say that they come there looking for information and had any difficulty getting it unless we couldn't find it. But even with that, our filing system is very good. And usually anything anyone wants. As a matter of fact, we get requests from the different government ministries and departments where these things might have emanated. We can find it and they can't find it. So we have a very old but very efficient system. So you can tell Ms. Brown that. She's responding to. Okay, so yeah.
I'll take the mic and read her response to you. Technology is allowed for access. I am determined because access is a human right. And yet we can utilize virtual components in the interim. So she's agreeing with you. All right, I think that is it. Thank you very much for being a part of this session. Thank you to the panelists for being willing to participate.